Here we are in the city of Geneva in front of the church that Calvin pastored, St. Peter's. As we've been saying, Calvin really just didn't want to be here in the city of Geneva. He said, "I'd rather die 1,000 deaths." One of the reasons for that was that the continued thorn in his side were a group of people called the libertines. These were like the version of the Corinthians that took great pride in their Christian liberty. In those days, every man in Europe, for the most part, had mistresses. In the city of Geneva, they actually passed a law that men could only have one mistress. Well, there was a man by the name of, I think you pronounce it Bertolti or Boltoltar, whatever. He was a member of this church, and Calvin in this church excommunicated him for his immorality. He appealed his case to the city council, and Calvin and the consistory here didn't believe that the city council had any authority to reverse decisions of excommunication, but the city council did it. They permitted Bertolti back into the congregation and even permitted him access to the Lord's Supper. And so I want to get this right. So the Sunday morning arrives, and there's a crisis of the communion. It came to a head in 1553. This Bertolti character, he was forbidden to take the communion, he was excommunicated. Here's what Calvin wrote to him. Calvin says this: "I took an oath that I had resolved rather to meet death than profane so shamefully the holy supper of the Lord. My ministry is abandoned if I suffer the authority of the consistory to be trampled upon and extend the supper of Christ to open scoffers. I would rather die 100 times than subject Christ to such foul mockery." And so you can imagine the Lord's Day arrives. This Bertolti is here along with a whole bunch of other libertarians. They are the libertines. They are waiting. Calvin finishes his sermon. He comes down from the pulpit. He consecrates the elements of the Lord's Supper, and Bertolti and the libertines rush at the communion table. And this is what happens. "These hands you may crush," Calvin says. He flings his arms around the elements, and he says, "These hands you may crush, these arms you may lop off. My life you may take, my blood is yours. You may shed it, but you shall never force me to give holy things to the profaned and dishonor the table of my God." After this, says Beza, Calvin's first biographer, quote, "The sacred ordinance was celebrated with a profound silence and under solemn awe, and in the presence as if the deity himself had been visible among them."